A silent, modern room where sweet purple flowers softly bloom today, bringing illusions of absolute peace. The scent whispers of restful nights. Yet beneath this fragrant surface, an ancient and silent darkness quietly waits, entirely forgotten by time. To understand the true weight of this fragile blossom, one must carefully peel back the centuries, leaving the safety of the present behind. It was never born to soothe. This color was forged in harshness, a bitter testament to wild, endless survival, standing utterly defiant. The journey backward in time begins, as the modern illusion slowly fades away, revealing true ancient origins. Here among the jagged rocks, a stubborn, fierce life finally takes root, against all odds. The plant must weaponize its own defensive oils, turning sweet fragrance into toxic chemical armor to repel dangerous predators. It fights the blistering sun, standing strong against the brutal desert heat, unyielding and utterly wild. These hidden drops of liquid armor possess power to destroy unseen microscopic life, preserving the fragile plant. Humans soon recognized this lethal purity. They sought it not for sleep, to fight the terrifying unseen mortal rot, conquering the silent grave. The ancient empires sought out these blooming warriors. They crushed the resilient petals, extracting the sharp, deeply pungent purple blood for sacred ancient rituals. It arrives at the Great Pyramids, where priests prepare to conquer human flesh, defying nature itself. Mixed with salts and sacred ancient resins, it binds the frail mortal tissue safely, stopping time entirely. It masks the horrible stench, replacing foul odors of death with immortality. Inside the royal tomb, a delicate but fierce botanical line, drawn softly between eternal life and destruction, waiting to return. Before it touched the delicate silk of royalty, this resilient purple survivor clung desperately to the absolute edge of existence. Water is a rare and precious ghost here, forcing desperate, thirsty roots to dig deeper, seeking any hidden moisture. To survive the brutal and relentless burning sky, it forged a powerful chemical armor, entirely hidden within its fragrant petals. These microscopic silver glands act as tiny fortresses, holding highly concentrated lethal, toxic defenses, designed to repel hungry desert scavengers. The sweet scent we adore is actually a warning, signaling a profound and bitter toxicity to anything that dares consume it. When broken or torn by the harsh elements, the plant immediately bleeds fragrant purple oils, healing itself with astonishing speed. Ancient nomads walking through these unforgiving, silent valleys soon discovered the magical healing properties hidden within the crushed purple blossoms. They noticed how the pungent and sharp aroma could magically chase away invisible crawling parasites, keeping their fragile bodies perfectly safe. Word of this potent botanical shield traveled fast, reaching the monumental gates of ancient Egypt, where life and death were obsessed over. Here in the land of the mighty pharaohs, the humble wild weed became sacred treasure, traded for gold and precious jewels. The priests of the temple saw its true power, realizing it possessed a divine, absolute ability to halt the terrifying process of decay. The fragrant purple essence was boiled and purified, creating a toxic and powerful dark serum, designed to conquer mortal rot forever. Deep within the suffocating darkness of the tomb, the priests prepared to challenge nature itself, using the wildflower as their ultimate weapon. The scent was not meant for the living. It was a bridge for the dead, keeping the pharaoh intact for absolute eternity. Wrapped in the bitter oils of the wild plant, the royal flesh defied the hungry worms, sleeping perfectly undisturbed in the fragrant shadows. The great ancient empires inevitably crumbled into dust, but this potent, fragrant secret survived. Crossing the unforgiving desert sands, Greek physicians meticulously studied the bitter purple blossoms, unlocking a brilliant and fierce power to cleanse deeply infected wounds. Roman legions marched across massive and brutal continents, carrying these tiny, magical dried buds as essential military medical supplies. They tossed the crushed flowers into hot water, watching the dark purple oils bloom to wash away battle filth. The luxurious Roman baths smelled intensely of lavender, masking the terrible and sharp stench of unwashed masses and disease. They named it from their word to wash, completely unaware of the looming shadow that would soon engulf Europe. The magnificent marble pillars eventually shattered and fell, plunging humanity into a dark abyss where science and medicine vanished. Nature quickly reclaimed the blood-stained and broken stones, as wild lavender roots silently choked the forgotten ancient human glory. A new era of absolute terror slowly began, where raw filth and rotting garbage flooded the narrow medieval streets. Black rats scurried through the cold, damp shadows, carrying a microscopic and invisible grim reaper, hidden within their cursed fleas. Helpless citizens prayed frantically to a silent sky, desperately seeking a divine botanical miracle to save their fragile lives. Isolated monks carefully cultivated the sacred purple herb, believing the strong and biting fragrance was a holy protective shield. Medical scholars believed bad air carried the sickness, creating a bizarre and terrifying theory that sweet scents repelled death. Huge bonfires of dried lavender burned day and night, releasing thick and heavy aromatic smoke to purify the cursed air. But the ultimate test was yet to come, as the devastating and horrific plague finally knocked on their doors. The deadly plague sweeps across the desperate continent, leaving only absolute silence and cold death as fear paralyzed everyone. Strange dark spots appeared on the helpless victims, bringing swift and brutal, absolute mortal pain, destroying whole, desperate families. The crowded cobblestone streets transformed into open graveyards, filled with terrifying piles of forgotten bodies, rotting under the sun. Medical men believed evil odors caused the sickness, calling it a dark and toxic miasma, spreading rapidly through air. Panic forced kings and peasants into blind desperation, seeking any possible defense against the invisible and relentless, brutal enemy. They frantically gathered massive bundles of wild lavender, hoping the sharp, sweet, botanical magical scent would cleanse the poison. Entire villages became engulfed in thick purple smoke, burning fields to push back the darkness that consumed their neighbors. Wealthy lords wore heavy pouches of dried flowers, pressing the bitter, fragrant herbs tightly against their terrified, trembling faces. Churches echoed with endless prayers and burning incense, but the brutal, invisible reaper walked freely, ignoring all desperate pleas. A brave physician grinds the resilient purple buds, mixing the toxic oil with strong vinegar to wash infected hands. Carts heavily loaded with the dead rolled endlessly through the suffocating and deeply infected medieval and sorrowful silent towns. Even the sturdy wooden wheels reeked of death, until citizens violently crushed fresh wild lavender upon bloody, wet cobblestones. Marketplaces once filled with food now sold survival, trading small dried purple bundles for absolute and heavy, pure gold. A single fragile blossom falls onto a corpse, landing gently upon the cold, pale skin, marking a tragic end. In this absolute dark age of immense suffering, a strange and terrifying medical uniform emerged from the bitter shadows. The terrifying figures stepped into infected homes, bringing a heavy and profound herbal scent to fight the invisible decay. Their iconic long leather beaks served a purpose, holding tightly packed dried wild purple blossoms, acting as absolute biological filters. They believed this sweet and sharp botanical shield could effectively purify the dark, corrupted air, keeping the foul miasma away. Thick essential oils coated their heavy leather gloves, creating a toxic barrier against deadly touch of the suffering, dying masses. The overwhelming fragrance announced their grim, terrifying arrival, echoing through the silent and empty streets like a final, tragic prayer. A heavy wooden cane examined the rotting flesh, carefully avoiding direct and fatal physical contact, while spreading the crushed herbs. Desperate apothecaries worked tirelessly in the dim shadows, boiling massive quantities of resilient wildflowers, seeking an ultimate medical cure. The bitter, dark purple essence bubbled and steamed, releasing sharp and potent chemical airborne compounds that stung human tired eyes. Wealthy families locked themselves inside heavy stone fortresses, burning huge mounds of the precious weed, drowning in the protective smoke. Glowing embers turned the delicate petals into ash, transforming beautiful living nature into carbon defense against an unseen biological terror. Exhausted gravediggers tied small, fragrant bundles around necks, hoping the scent would mask horrific decay surrounding their tragic daily labor. Sweat and dirt mixed with the botanical oils, absorbing deep into the rough, torn linen, becoming a second defensive skin. They stood alone between the living and dead, breathing solely through the dark, bitter herbs, trusting nature above human science. The cold glass eyes of the frightening mask reflected a world completely engulfed in suffering, filtered through a purple haze. For those who barely survived the brutal nightmare, the smell of lavender was forever changed, permanently stained by immense grief. As the devastating plague swallowed the entire dying continent, a dark and twisted legend slowly emerged from the heavy shadows. 4 ruthless men wandered among the forgotten, rotting dead, stealing heavy golden rings and precious gems without fearing the sickness. They walked freely through the highly infected silent zones, stripping the rich and poor alike bare, while remaining perfectly untouched. Their absolute immunity baffled the terrified and dying authorities, until their dark and bitter botanical secret was finally violently extracted. Captured and bound before the desperate and cruel judges, they traded their magical, potent, protective recipe for their worthless lives. The famous recipe required a sharp and highly acidic base, heavily infused with wild, tough purple lavender to repel the death. Desperate apothecaries brewed this magical and deeply toxic concoction, filling the dark wooden rooms with stinging and heavy floral vapors. Strong vinegar powerfully extracted the defensive and deadly oils, creating a potent biological and chemical shield against the crawling decay. Citizens desperately rubbed the harsh liquid on tired skin, praying the bitter and biting sweet scent would keep them alive. They soaked thick, dark linen cloths in the mixture, holding the damp and heavily dripping fabric over their fearful faces. As the long and tragic dark years slowly passed, the terrifying, invisible, biological, and merciless enemy finally began to retreat. Humanity survived the absolute darkness at a terrible cost, while the wild and resilient purple flower remained perfectly, completely unchanged. The devastating trauma left a profound and deep psychological scar, linking the sweet and heavy botanical fragrance permanently to mortal grief. Future generations would deliberately and slowly forget the horror, burying the dark and heavy bloody past beneath a sweet, romantic illusion. A new grand royal era prepares to gently wash away, transforming the bitter scent of total survival into pure, delicate luxury. The dark era fades into royal luxury, where the fierce survival scent becomes pure, refined, delicate Victorian elegance. Queen Victoria fell deeply in absolute love, demanding the bitter dark purple blossom for her personal grand palaces. The wild, tough weed of the dead enters the grand and beautiful gardens worn by high noble society. Royal servants carefully polish the heavy floors, using the rich, sweet purple oil to sanitize the grand estate. But when her beloved royal husband died, she draped her tragic deep mourning in this ancient protective aroma. Black silk dresses completely saturated with scent, masking the immense, deep royal sorrow, just as it masked plague. A clever psychological and vast cultural shift, erasing the horrible, terrifying, bloody history, replacing survival with pure romance. Elegant, beautiful crystal bottles held the liquid, hiding the ancient, fierce, toxic reality beneath a delicate, feminine facade. Massive commercial farming replaced the wild roots, taming the deeply resilient, harsh plant into neat and perfect rows. Steel blades cleanly harvest the uniform flowers, stripping away the brutal, savage origins for mass, modern, industrial production. The world entirely forgot the plague doctors, embracing the soft, calming, floral myth sold by wealthy perfume merchants. Fine white lace soaked in lavender water, resting gently against soft, clean skin, far away from mass graves. It became the defining smell of cleanliness, completely separated from the absolute terror of the devastating Dark Ages. Small, fragrant bags tucked into wooden drawers, keeping clothes perfectly fresh and safe. A quiet echo of survival. A monumental historical and brilliant botanical deception, turning the desperate, dark medieval shield into absolute luxury and peace. The Industrial Age completely sanitized history, wiping away the dark, bloody past, to sell pure relaxation. Concentrated liquid drops into small bottles, losing all connection to the fierce plague and the desperate, ancient survival. Millions of identical glass bottles ship worldwide, entering bright and perfectly safe modern homes as a simple bedtime remedy. Colorful labels promise absolute peaceful slumber, never mentioning the terrible and tragic death that it once bravely fought. We return to the silent bedroom, where the glowing modern diffuser softly breathes, the ancient ghost into the air. The white mist looks entirely innocent, hiding the bitter and highly toxic warfare waged by the wild desert plant. A modern human closes heavy eyes, breathing the fierce and ancient botanical shield that once guarded the mighty pharaohs. A tiny bag under the pillow, resting silently beneath the soft, warm cotton, holding the dark secrets of history. The gentle scent fills the darkness, wrapping the sleeping mind in total safety, while echoes of the past whisper. A single blossom sits completely still, preserving its bitter and highly toxic core behind a brilliant, sweet purple disguise. Morning light eventually washes the room, erasing the invisible and heavy medieval ghosts, leaving only a fresh, floral breeze. Floating dust dances in the sunlight, carrying the final, lingering, pure botanical molecules into the bright and peaceful morning. Outside, a small bush sways gently, connecting this quiet, domestic, beautifully tamed space back to the brutal limestone cliffs. The great illusion remains completely perfect, hiding the ultimate botanical weapon of death inside a symbol of eternal sleep. A humble and beautiful purple weed, conquering the devastating rot of human empires, and silently conquered our modern dreams.